The O-Bahn in northeastern Adelaide was opened in 1986 with 2 stops between Tea Tree Plaza and the city, with passing express lanes at each of the interchanges. I'm on the side of the O-Bahn track at Modbury, and behind me we can see the result of the O-Bahn, where this area around Modbury is now zoned as CBD, Central Business District. The O-Bahn is so successful that it actually has full fare box recovery. The question is, how much did it cost to build and how was that cost paid for? It was paid for out of normal revenue from the state government, and it wasn't an attempt to use any method of betterment capture. One of the problems with betterment capture, as seen with Crossrail in London with the tunnels and the Sydney Harbour Bridge in Sydney, and the heavy rail in 1930 in Darling to Glen Waverlty Railway, and the Melbourne City Loop in 1985, and more recently the Parramatta Light Rail in 2020 in New South Wales, is identifying who are the beneficiaries. And so sometimes it's put onto commercial properties, and so it's very problematic. If we look at what's happened here in Tea Tree Gully, the city of Tea Tree Gully, is all the lands around here have become more valuable. And so the state government levies various charges. One charge is the charge when you sell your property. So the state of South Australia gained revenue from when all these properties have been sold to the new owner. The other way that the state government gets money is via land tax. And land tax probably is a much more suitable tax. That's the M44 now, going here from Golden Grove, Tea Tree Plaza, Paradise, through to Marion Interchange, and potentially to Flinders Medical Centre. One of the things that the state governments around Australia have done with land tax, a tax which occurs on all properties, is here in South Australia, the principal private home or residence is tax-free from land tax. Whereas a normal property who's got a value of $1.1 million will pay a land tax of $727. And normal residential property of a value of about $500,000 will pay $387 per year. Now, the Premier of New South Wales, Palaszczuk, is arguing that state governments should use land tax as a much better way of raising state revenues for infrastructure. Land tax would apply to all properties. At the moment, when it comes to residential properties, all the properties in South Australia have a regional landscape levy. In an earlier time, when we've been living at Highbury, we actually were paying a River Torrens improvements levy because we were living near the River Torrens, so that was a proximity tax. Now we have every property in South Australia collects or pays a regional land levy, which is then given to various boards around South Australia. So if we take the suggestion from the Premier of New South Wales, Palaszczuk, if land tax was the way we would get most of our funding, we could therefore pay for things like the O-Bahn using land tax. So that all of the residents in Tea Tree Gully would be paying land tax. not just people who are renting out properties, but everybody who owns a property in the metropolitan area would pay land tax, and that land tax would take the place of sales tax when you sell your property, and it's a much more suitable way of raising money for infrastructure, such as the new proposed railway line or bus rapid transit to Mount Barker. Land tax on all properties in an area should be used as a method of financing infrastructure. If we look at the historical examples of where betterment methods have been used, we'll find that it isn't a very happy story. In Victoria, Darlington to Glen Waverlty was a hard rail system, heavy rail system, which was being built by the Victorian Government and was going to use the rates and taxes on properties as a way of financing it. And the way that you would do that would put a levy on it, and they wanted to get a 23% levy. And they were doing this on their properties of unsubdivided land. This unsubdivided land meant that the owners of the property were going to be given a cost and get no benefit for some years, and the ratepayers protested, and when the people refused to pay their money, the local council then proceeded to sell their properties, which is what local councils do when you don't pay the rates and taxes. This caused such consternation that the ratepayers took the matter to the court, and the court said the law was illegal. And the government went to the Commonwealth Bank and asked the Commonwealth Bank to cancel the interest payments that were demanded by the bank. And so the whole thing collapsed. A structure which is going to cost in modern money $14 million. The Sydney Harbour, which is 932, also tried to use the betterment. It originally going to cost something like £2 million Australian. It ended up costing £6.25 million, which in today's money is $641 million. This is a much bigger scheme than just the bridge. It was a bridge for trains as well as for cars and passengers. And Bradford was the engineer at the time with Jack Lang as Premier, and they were building elevated railways. And these elevated railways were meant to communicate with a railway bridge. Again, this betterment tax was looking at about 60% levy and was so unpopular that you may remember the famous example of one of the ratepayers coming and interrupting the ceremony of opening the bridge and cutting the ribbon. The ratepayers got some revenge some years later because they cancelled the Betterment Levy. The Sydney-Melbourne loop in 1985 was going to cost $650 million, and eventually that comes out in today's money at $2 billion. And they wanted a 3% levy, which is almost nothing. But the problem was there were two different levies, and again that particular levy was cancelled some years later. The example of the Crossrail in London is a bit more complicated because the Crossrail in London, actually most of it is actually tunnels. In terms of the expenditure, the section away from central London is existing railway systems. And of course tunnels are quiet and there's no disruption, just as the O-Bahn is quiet. The O-Bahn is a railway system with rubber tires, which is very quiet. The O-Bahn has grade separation. Here we are at Smart Road and there's a bridge over the railway line. All these vehicles going past us at the moment are not affected by any of the vehicles travelling the O-Bahn. Pedestrians can come and go without any problems. So the Crossrail in London is a rather unusual example where betterment might be working. The other example is in Sydney with the Parramatta Light Rail, which is being built at the moment and was completed just 2 years ago in 2020 at a cost of $2.4 billion. and they've got a developer charge, and the developer's charge is so complicated that it takes 27 pages when you read the document. And you've got the situation now where Dominic Perrotto, the Premier of New South Wales, wants to get rid of betterment methods of funding infrastructure and wants to use land tax. Land tax has the advantage that everybody pays if you levy everybody for land tax. At the moment, most people who live in a home never pay any land tax because they just are not levied with it. It means changing the way we do fundraising. If you live in a property and sell the property, you will find when you buy the next property you'll pay stamp duty. So on a normal home of $500,000 you'll pay $25,000 as stamp duty. If you sell a house 4 times, because over a period of 50 years you will have paid $100,000 in stamp duty. Whereas if you just stay put, you'll pay nothing. If you stay put, you'll get all the benefits of the railway, public transport system, but you will not pay any part of the money. The most equitable way, as mentioned by the Premier of New South Wales, is to use land tax, where everybody pays land tax. So let's look now at Modbury interchange at Tea Tree Plaza. We'll see the interchange behind us. We can see the park and ride for people who use cars, and we turn the camera around, we'll see Smart Road with vehicles moving freely and the rest of the structures around us. So this is Smart Road with pedestrians walking over the top of the O-Bahn track, and there's a path underneath the road which communicates with this rather large development which we've seen previously, and we'll know that the advantage of buses is when it comes to the quiet times you can take buses off the track and have them as a layover. And so we'll find that just down the road here there's actually a number of buses which are, please go through ma'am, just walk straight through. Fine.
Sorry, I thought you were talking to me. Sorry.
No, I was talking to the camera.
Sorry.
Just down the road here there are buses which are in a layover position where you don't have the problems of railway systems you need, as in Melbourne, a whole series of yards where the trains are held in the quiet period between rush periods. The advantage of land tax is everybody contributes towards the cost of the infrastructure.